We did the running backs earlier today. Now we got to go through every single matchup all over again to find the best must start and sit wide receivers for week 8 fantasy football, guys. I can't wait for another week of fantasy football, guys. And I'm just happy to be here with y'all today. So please go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to this channel to show your support and help me get to 7,000 subscribers, guys. So let's go ahead and just dive right back into these matchups right here. Jets and Giants first matchup. Nobody's must start. Every single week, we're not playing Giants wide receivers. It's not going to work out well because one week, Wan'Dale Robinson has a decent amount of targets and he gets a decent amount of yards going, right? And then the next week, he doesn't do anything, a la last week when they beat the Commanders. It's not good. The Giants wide receivers are not to be trusted. The Jets, I can trust one, and honestly, I was honestly tempted to put Garrett Wilson in the must-start category. It's going to be incredibly hard any week for me to put Garrett Wilson in must-start territory for the obvious reasons. Obviously, because Zach Wilson is not good. Now, before the bye week, he actually went on a stretch of games there where he was actually playing his best football as a pro. So I'm not saying that he can't get the ball to Garrett Wilson, but we need to proceed with caution here. Garrett Wilson is averaging around 7 to 9 targets per game, but that doesn't mean he's always efficient with them, and it's not his fault. It's because his quarterback can't always consistently get him the ball. So we need to leave that little room for error here with Garrett Wilson, and that's why he's in flex territory, but he is an upper tier flex option. Anybody else on this team with the Jets, you can't trust that. You can't trust Allen Lazard. You just can't trust those other receivers because Garrett Wilson's the only one that matters to the Jets, and he's the only one that matters in real football. So Garrett Wilson's the only flexible guy, and then everybody else, you go ahead and you sit. Jaguars at Steelers here. Christian Kirk's my only must start. Christian Kirk, his target share is the steadiest. He's got the most upside week to week because him and Trevor Lawrence have great chemistry. We know that he's going to get consistently targeted every single week because of the contract they have him on and because he's worked really well with Trevor Lawrence. So Christian Kirk is always going to be a must start really from now on unless something dramatic changes. But the other 3 guys are flexible and like they're relatively okay flex options here. Calvin Ridley is actually in the upper tier because the matchup this week is not as bad as people think. And I get it. Like the reason he's not a must start is because what he's done already this year. I don't like it when he does that to my audience. I don't like it when my audience is struggling with Calvin Ridley. It's not good. So I understand that, and let me just tell you, this is actually a good matchup here because Calvin Ridley is going up against the defense that with their 2 outside starters, Levi Wallace, Patrick Peterson in Pittsburgh, they've given up a combined 600 plus yards this season. They're not very good. So he's got a decent matchup here. And I can actually see a world where he has a good game. So I would start him over both Pittsburgh wide receivers in this matchup. All while acknowledging Pickens was much better than I thought last week. And so was Deontay Johnson. So I think that both of those guys are also flexible as well. They're not in the upper tier. I would say George Pickens is knocking on the door of upper tier flex opportunities. I would put him in the middle tier, though. And same with Deontay. I'll go with Pickens over Deontay because I know that Pickens can get into the end zone, though. Deontay hasn't seen the end zone since 2021. That's just the reality here with Deontay Johnson. So everybody else is going to be a must-sit here. You don't need to mess around with anybody else. Zay Jones out again. Eagles and Commanders here. We've got A.J. Brown, of course, going on an absolute tear this year. Absolute tear. 5 straight games with 125 yards. It's unbelievable. What he is doing right now is just ridiculous. He's a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy football at half PPR. You don't ever consider sitting A.J. Brown, especially in this matchup. The Commanders' passing defense is awful. So absolutely fire up A.J. Brown. Devonta Smith is in the upper tier because of how bad the secondary is. Because I also acknowledge for weeks and weeks, I've had Devonta Smith in must-start territory. I can't keep doing this to you guys. He has not seen enough consistent volume, and there hasn't been enough consistent upside here with Devonta Smith over basically the last month of football. That's what we're seeing right now with Devonta Smith. So we're calling him upper tier because he still has a good matchup, but we need to proceed with caution on this because Devonta Smith so far this year, aside from the first 2 weeks, has been gross. Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel, they're both... Terry's a middle tier guy because he still is the wide receiver 1 on this team. He still does see a relatively consistent target share, and he also is the biggest playability guy. He's got the best big playability on that team. That's what Terry McLaurin's situation is. He's just their best talent as far as their offense goes, really. So Terry McLaurin continues to be a middle tier flex guy, but with as bad as their quarterback is playing, it's not good. So same thing will apply to Curtis Samuel. He went on a hot streak for a little bit, was finding the end zone. The only thing that I can say is the reason he's still a flexible guy is because his target share, his volume is pretty consistent this year. He's been getting volume for basically the last month. That's been consistent. So I think he's a flexible guy, but he is in the lower tier, to be honest with you, because like I said, Sam Howell, as bad as he's playing, and this matchup, it's not good. The Eagles defense is going to get after Sam Howell. Jahan Dotson, it's been one of the biggest tragedies in all of 2023 fantasy football. You cannot play Jahan Dotson, and it's depressing, guys. And everybody else, you can't play either. Rams and Cowboys here. Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, CeeDee Lamb. They're pretty much all no-brainers, right? Cooper Kupp, I get it. Last week was bad. You can trust Cooper Kupp this week. Cooper Kupp got shut down last week like he hadn't in a long time. Cooper Kupp is going to be fine. You continue to play him. Puka Nacua, obviously you keep playing him too. I've been saying Puka Nacua, hold on to the guy because Puka Nacua has lots of value moving forward with Cooper Kupp, and we saw it last week. So, yeah, he's going to be good still. You continue to roll him out with lots of confidence. CeeDee Lamb, you do it too. CeeDee Lamb he had his best game right before the bye week against the Chargers. And also, this matchup here is really good. The Pittsburgh Steelers just sliced up the Rams secondary. It can be done. If the Steelers can do it, the Cowboys can do it as well. CeeDee Lamb definitely must start. Nobody else is flexible, though. You can't play Tutu Atwell from the Rams because since Cooper Kupp has come back, his workload has dropped significantly, as predicted. Brandon Cooks, you can't play him either. He got more involved right before the bye, but it still wasn't anything worth playing in fantasy football. You've got one guy in Dallas you could count on, and that's CeeDee Lamb because he dominates the target share, and he's the best one out of all of them by a country mile. And then you got your 2 Rams wide receivers. Feel good about everybody in those starting category. Nobody else you could play. Vikings at Packers here. Jordan Addison, you continue to roll with him, man. Jordan Addison, I'm kind of taking a victory lap on this one because I said this guy was pro ready as soon as right before the NFL draft happened. This is a good wide receiver here. And it's obviously easy to say now, hindsight's 2020, but Jordan Addison's a really good player that I was hyping up all the way back in March. So Jordan Addison, you keep playing this guy because the Packers secondary is still really, really down and bad right now. Christian Watson, KJ Osborne, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, they're all flexible though. They are. I am not big on playing Christian Watson after that debacle last week. They had a fantastic matchup right at their feet after a bye week, and they didn't do anything. So I'm not telling my audience. I know I've seen a lot of other people, a lot of other platforms saying out there, yeah, you could fire up Christian Watson. I'm not telling my audience that. He's not a must-start guy. He's a flexible guy for sure because of the matchup right here. But at the same time, guys, remember what he did last week against Denver. He couldn't even crack 40 yards receiving in that game. No, the volume is just not there consistently. So big playability still there. I can understand wanting to play him. And I'm not saying that he's a bad flex option. I'm just saying that, remember, this is not a must-start situation right here because of what they did against Denver. So proceed with caution, but I would say that he is in the upper tier. KJ Osborne, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, they're all in the middle tier. KJ Osborne has been getting consistent volume without Justin Jefferson in this offense. So he's definitely a flexible guy moving forward. Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, they're still seeing volume with Christian Watson as well. Jaden Reed has become a good player for the Packers this year. Romeo Doubs is still involved. So, again, proceed with caution with Packers wide receivers because Jordan Love is not good. And then everybody else is irrelevant in this matchup. Falcons and Titans here. Nobody's a must start. This just so happens to be the two of the teams in the NFL that have just a mess at the wide receiver position. Drake London, DeAndre Hopkins, they're both flexible because they're both seeing just a ridiculous target share on this offense. But, I mean, the quarterback situation is not good in either place. Atlanta, Desmond Ridder's been bad all year. And then Tennessee, you've got Will Levis taking the start for the first time this year. We don't know how good he's going to be. And I actually heard a report that Will Levis might split snaps with Malik Willis. That makes no sense whatsoever at all. So Tennessee, I don't even know what they're doing right now. I would try my best to not play DeAndre Hopkins. He's in the middle tier of flex options right now. Of course, with volume, with injuries that we're seeing right now, you can play him. I just wouldn't go out of my way to do it. Drake London in the same, he's in the upper tier because of the consistency that he's starting to see. He's actually starting to develop a little bit of chemistry with Desmond Ridder. But again, remember that the ceiling here is not as high as it should be because of Desmond Ridder. And that's what I'll say about Drake London right here. And then everybody else, you cannot consider a wide receiver 2 on the Titans or the Falcons, guys. Just move on. Patriots and Dolphins here. You start your 2 Dolphins. Tyreek Hill, don't even need to discuss it at all. Jalen Waddle, I consider him a must-start still. I get it. It's been largely a big disappointment this year from Jalen Waddle so far. The guy's still involved in this offense, though, and he's actually starting to get more involved. Like, there was those first couple weeks where he wasn't seeing any touchdowns, wasn't seeing much upside. He's found the end zone recently. And they're coming off a bad loss to the Philadelphia Eagles. I think this team's going to be fired up, ready to go. And the Patriots will sell out to stop Tyreek Hill. And I do think there will be opportunities there for Jalen Waddle to get open. And I expect Tua to find him. Kendrick Bourne is flexible. He is flexible. Now, with that said, understand that Jalen Ramsey was just taken off of the IR. So he is actually going to play versus the Patriots. Does it affect Kendrick Bourne? I would say a lot of things do because none of these Patriots wide receivers are any good. But just from a volume consistency standpoint, I do think that if you're really desperate, he is in the middle tier of flex options this week. And everybody else, you go ahead and you sit. Saints and Colts here. Chris Olave play him. I get it. He got arrested earlier in the week. Yada, yada, yada. I'm not making a moral statement on that. What I do know is that Chris Olave, actually before anything happened, I actually did say I was a little bit concerned about it because it's not the target share. The target share is there. He had 15 targets on that Thursday night game versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Dude's got plenty of targets. It's just not all adding up. But that's all in relativity, guys. We need to remember it's all in relativity. So when I say that, I'm saying he's not living up to the expectations I had for him because I thought he had top 5 upside this season. I don't think he does anymore. But in relativity, Chris Olave is still better than the majority of wide receiver options here. He's my wide receiver 17 on the week. I'm playing Chris Olave this week. Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, they're both flexible. Michael Pittman is always going to be in the borderline area. He will always be right on the cusp of must start and right on the cusp of top end flex options every single week because this is a matchup that's tough. The Saints defense is tough. So I would not say go out of your way because Michael Pittman's about to have some great day. And in fact, if you look back to week 7, he actually had a touchdown, was like 80 yards that saved his week. So he's not always going to be consistent for you. Just with this offense, with the quarterback, it's not always going to be consistent, but he is going to be consistently their main target. Their main target and their main big playability at the wide receiver position. Josh Downs has been too good recently to not have in flex territory. The dude is seeing the volume, and he actually hit a big play last week. Josh Downs is a legit player, but again, I'm just saying matchup is tough here. I would put Josh Downs in the upper middle tier of flex options. And then Rashid Shaheed, Michael Thomas, they're both in like the middle tier. The middle tier of flex options here. I'll always play Rashid Shaheed over Michael Thomas because roughly when you average it out, they're seeing relatively the same amount of volume. But Rashid Shaheed hits more big plays than Michael Thomas does. That's why I prefer him over Michael Thomas. I think they're both flexible though, and then everybody else is irrelevant. Texans at Panthers here. Adam Thielen, Nico Collins, Fire him up. Fire him up. Adam Thielen's been excellent in fantasy this year. And really the reason why is because he's had so many garbage time points in fantasy football. It's ridiculous. I think he's going to see it again versus the Houston Texans. They're both coming off bye weeks. Houston's just a better team by a mile right now. Panthers haven't won yet. That's just how it's going right now. So Adam Thielen, I think, regardless of if they're getting blown out or not and they're in garbage time, Adam Thielen's still a very good fantasy option either way. Nico Collins, I continue to beat his drum because nobody else is doing it. No other fantasy football YouTuber is as high as I am on Nico Collins. I don't know why either. Nico Collins is a really good player. He's almost averaging 100 yards per game. This guy's their wide receiver 1. He's scoring touchdowns. This guy's been really good in fantasy football. You want him in this kind of matchup, that's for sure. That's for sure. Tank Dell, DJ Chark, they're both flexible. I would say DJ Chark is more in the lower middle tier or low tier, and then Tank Dell's in the middle tier because we haven't seen Tank Dell since before the bye week, and he was in the concussion protocol. But Tank Dell has had some good weeks. He's had some bad weeks. This is a matchup I like. I do think that Tank Dell will continue to be involved. So I do think that Tank Dell is absolutely flexible in a matchup versus the Panthers. DJ Chark's always going to be a decent deep shot to take because he's got big play upside. And his volume every week, he's usually seeing around 5 to 6 targets. So if you want to take a deep shot, I can understand it. And if you want to hit on a 60-yard touchdown bomb, if you want to take that shot, DJ Chark's not a bad option. Robert Woods is a sit. This guy is pretty consistent, but it's consistently low volume. He's getting like 3 targets per game. It's not good. Terrace Marshall, you continue to sit him as well. The Panthers are looking to trade him. Browns and Seahawks here. Nobody's a must start, but look at that flex territory list, man. I've got them all basically as flexible guys. Now there's obviously tiers to this one, and we're going to go through it. Amari Cooper, he's basically in his own little spot. Amari Cooper's still in the high end of flex options here because he is the wide receiver 1, and he did work well with PJ Walker just a couple short weeks ago. Amari Cooper's always boom or bust. We know the upside that he has, but we also know the floor that he has, and it's low. So Amari Cooper, proceed with caution, but it's because of his upside, he is in that upper tier. Jackson Smith-Njigba, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, they're all in the same tier. All the Seahawks wide receivers are in the same tier. Tyler Lockett is coming into the game questionable, so keep an eye on it. That's why he's got stars beside his name. Keep an eye on that situation here. If he doesn't go, Jackson Smith-Njigba is the clear favorite. If he does go, it muddies it up really, of course. But with Jackson Smith-Njigba's breakout game last week, I said it throughout the week, I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is here to stay. Now, that may mean that he gets another downish game, but Jackson Smith-Njigba moving forward, I anticipate always being in flex territory at the very minimum. DK Metcalf is flexible. Full week of practice. Like I said, leading up to last week, I read a story where maybe the Seahawks were just sitting him because of the penalties that he was causing. So, I don't know. The reason I say that is because it could matter. Because if the Seahawks are a little irritated with him and a little frustrated with him, things could get a little bit ugly. DK Metcalf wants the ball. And Jackson Smith-Njigba's emergence might limit the amount of times DK gets the ball. Just one to keep an eye on. I still do think he's flexible. And then Elijah Moore is really in the lower tier. He is rising up because his targets have been consistent. Consistently seeing 7 and 9 targets per game. But last week was the first week he had at least 40 yards receiving. We've got a long way to go here before I consider him in the upper tier of flex options. But based on volume and based on improvements last week, I could see it here. Everybody else must sit because there's really nobody else relevant. Bengals at 49ers here. Jamar Chase, you definitely fire him up. He's in his own tier above Brandon Ayuk. Jamar Chase, a no-brainer. This Bengals team, I think, is about to take off. I've discussed it over the week. They're coming off the bye week. They're getting a little bit healthier, giving Joe Burrow a time to rest that calf. I think the Bengals are about to take off and do their typical absolute hot streak throughout the rest of the season right here. And Jamar Chase, of course, a central piece of that effort. Brandon Ayuk is a must-start as well. Listen, I get it. Week to week, it's going to be a little bit disappointing and then really, really good. Brock Purdy cleared the concussion protocol, so he is expected to be the guy who plays for the 49ers tomorrow. Of course, that's better than Sam Darnold. That is better than Sam Darnold for sure. So I like that. I think Brandon Ayuk is the clear #1 wide receiver in there, and that's why he's in must-start territory. T. Higgins is upper tier because of what he can do, but again, you guys know this. T. Higgins has been a massive disappointment this year. It's been ugly to watch. Like, on a contract year of all things, it's not been pretty. So proceed with caution with T. Higgins, but acknowledge, of course, T. Higgins does have plenty of upside. Week to week, it doesn't matter. And also, guys, I didn't mention this with the Bengals, with Jamar Chase. The 49ers have a very susceptible pass defense. That's their weakness. Their run defense is strong. Their pass defense is weak. Addison just put up over 102 touchdowns last week. So the Bengals offense could absolutely throw for some air yards. So I tend to lean on the side of wanting to play T. Higgins as well. Juwan Jennings is flexible. I would say he's middle to lower tier, but without Deebo Samuel, he was used and he was effective in that game versus the Vikings. One to keep an eye on. I wouldn't say go out of your way to do it, but if you're in a deep league, if you've got some injuries, you need to take a shot. Juwan Jennings is not a bad option. He's the #2 wide receiver right now in San Francisco. Tyler Boyd always going to be relatively flexible, but he's always going to have a pretty low ceiling. It's a guy that could get you 20 points. It's also a guy that can get you nothing. You just have to be willing to play Russian roulette if you want to roll him out there. Everybody else is a must-sit. Chiefs at Broncos here. Nobody's a must-start because you know how it goes every week. With the Chiefs, there's always guys in the flex territory, but that flex territory is shrinking with the Chiefs specifically. With the Chiefs, Rashee Rice is below Courtland Sutton because I do believe that with Courtland Sutton's volume consistency, that's more valuable because he's seeing the end zone as well, and he's got more consistent work than Rashee Rice. Now, I do believe Rashee Rice is emerging as the clear wide receiver 1 in this offense, but there still are lots of moving pieces here. You've still got Travis Kelce as the main target. You've got Isaiah Pacheco getting targets. You've got Jerick McKinnon. You've got Jerick McKinnon getting targets. So it's always a little bit muddy in Kansas City, but I do believe that Rashee Rice is starting to separate himself, which puts him in the upper tier flex options right here. Jerry Jeudy, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, they're both lower tier guys to me. Jerry Jeudy, the first game against the Chiefs, awful. 3 for 14. Jerry Jeudy just has not been good this year. That's just a fact. Marquez Valdes-Scantling is always the ultimate boomer bust guy. He either gets you 20 to 25 points or he gets you 0. So you have to be willing to play Russian roulette on this one as well. Marvin Mims, Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney, you sit them. And honestly, I can understand wanting to drop any of those guys, although I might not depending on your situation, but definitely not play him this week. Ravens at Cardinals here. Zay Flowers is a start. No doubt about it. Zay Flowers is the clear wide receiver 1, and he's also just one of their top playmakers. He's getting consistent volume. This is a good matchup here against the Cardinals. Roll out Zay Flowers for sure. Hollywood is always going to be in the upper tier. Marquise Brown, always going to be in the upper tier flex options because he's clearly the wide receiver 1. The target share is always there. The upside just is always capped because of the offense's upside. And the Ravens this week, that's a tough matchup. That's a tough secondary. So I don't expect a whole lot there from Marquise Hollywood Brown this week. But he is, based on volume and based on his own big playability, still in that upper tier. Odell, Michael Wilson, I can see wanting to take the shot if you want a big play. But they're both lower tier because they're not consistent week to week. Michael Wilson sometimes sees 0 targets. Sometimes he'll see 3. Odell Beckham Jr. past couple of games, he's had decent games, but they're not consistent. Nothing I would feel confident telling my audience. They're upper tier. They're not upper tier. They're in the middle to lower tier. Rashad Bateman, you go ahead, you sit him. I get it. Last week he had a couple catches. There's not much excitement there from me. Everybody else is must sit. Bears at Chargers, the Sunday night game, Keenan Allen, roll him out again. He had a little bit of a down week last week for him, but it was still okay. For Keenan Allen, you just play him. You just play him because the Bears' passing defense, not good. Not good at all. So, Keenan Allen, I expect him to do work on Sunday night. DJ Moore, Joshua Palmer, they're both in the same tier, and honestly, they're very close to each other. They're both in that upper tier because DJ Moore is the wide receiver 1. He gets consistent volume, but the ceiling with Tyson Bagent is just not that high. But the Chargers defense is so susceptible. They can easily get thrown all over. So I do expect DJ Moore to do some work, which is why he's in that upper tier. But just with the quarterback uncertainty, I can't put him in must start. Joshua Palmer is quickly almost becoming a must start, really. Like, Joshua Palmer's almost there. So don't take it. Don't make anything of me having him below DJ Moore. I just think that Joshua Palmer is really, really close, and I like DJ Moore as well. Joshua Palmer had over 100 yards receiving last week, and he's been way better than Quentin Johnston. They trust him way more. So he's going to continue to be relevant this year for the entire rest of the season. Count on that. You could definitely flex play him in a lot of situations this week. Quentin Johnston is irrelevant. Honestly, I'd cut him if I had him in redraft. It's really not worth holding on to at this point. Let me take that back. I will keep him if you've got a deep bench, deep bench, and you could count on someone maybe having upside at the playoff time. But right now, guys, there's not much hope. If you're in a shallow league and you still got Quentin Johnston and you've got real players who can contribute now on your bench, drop him and pick one of those guys up. Darnell Mooney, it's just not, the upside just isn't there. He gets, 5 targets per game, but when you've got an offense like this, the upside usually is not going to be there, and it's not. Raiders at Lions here. Amon-Ra St. Brown, you roll him out there. He's been excellent lately. He's been fantastic. Nothing to really see here other than a great matchup where the Lions will crush the Raiders, and Jared Goff's going to have a great day. So is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Fire them up. Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, still must start. No doubt. And especially in a game script where they're going to be trailing and they're going to have to throw, Jacoby Myers and Devontae Adams, they're both must start. They're both seeing plenty amount of targets. And of course, Jacoby Myers has had really good games. So they're both really good options this week. And they've got Jimmy Garoppolo back for whatever that's worth. And it may be worth nothing. We'll have to see, but I still play both the Raiders wide receivers. Josh Reynolds, Jameson Williams, they're both in the middle tier. Josh Reynolds, I prefer him over Jameson because he's getting way more targets on a week-to-week basis. Jameson Williams he's either in the game plan or he's not. Jameson Williams last week was not in the game plan. So Jameson Williams is truly quickly becoming a Marquez Valdez-Scantling type in fantasy football. Best in best ball, because if he hits a 20-point game, it's great. You got him in best ball, but trying to play Russian roulette with this guy is going to be tricky, and that's exactly how I feel, regardless of the matchup, even though the matchup is great this week, and then everybody else is irrelevant. So let me know what questions you need answered before Week 8 Fantasy Football, and if you want to see the must-start and sit running backs for Week 8 Fantasy Football, click on this video right here.